Peace, love, and oh gosh, what happened? Okay. Okay. Peace, love, and black power family. Welcome to another episode of Get This Wisdom Live. I am your host for the evening, Shakti Sterner, and we are definitely going to get this wisdom tonight. However, before I go into the introduction, I have to provide our normal disclaimer. As you all know, this is a family platform created with by my family, with your family in mind. You may hear my children. I might have to ask questions, but beyond that, it'll be all fine. And so here we go. Before I get started, I'm going to say this. Nationality is an expression of the heart. And that is a direct quote from tonight's guest, Baba Mwalimu Baruti. We have him on with us. I am so excited right now. This is like a class for me too, you guys. So, Baba has been he has over 24 books, plus workbooks, and I mean internationally lecturing for 20 years. We have the Akabin Institute. We have so many things going on. So I'm going to be quiet because he could do a much better job at introducing himself than I can. So I'm going to go and be on mute right now. Peace and love, Baba. How are you? Thank you for coming on. Please provide an introduction to our audience.
Great, and it's an honor to be here, Sister Shakti. As we were saying earlier, this has been a long time coming, and for me, any forum that speaks to the heart of our warriors, that speaks to our warriors, to me, I am extremely glad to be on. And you said something which I tend to see a lot of in terms of programs like this, and they're very family centered. So you do hear the children. That's what you're supposed to hear, when you're in our community. We That's why we're here. We're a child family centered people. So for those who don't know, and I don't say that arrogantly, but for those who don't know, my name is Mwalimu Baruti. Everybody pretty much calls me Baba Baruti. I'm a self-published author of 28 books and four workbooks, which are directed toward the needs of our warriors, answering questions that I believe need to be answered for our warriors, or at least adding to the answers that are already available, or bringing back ideas as a mentor side, which have been there but somehow have become dropped over time. My wife and I, Iniya Musi Brudi, we have a homeschooling and African-centered, independent African-centered homeschooling institute, which has never taken a penny from anybody's government. We operate in that way so that we can say what needs to be said to our children and to the adults who are involved, because it's not just children. I guess I maybe should explain Ackerman Institute a little bit, because it started out as a result of our daughter, who was at a independent school here in Atlanta, and they decided that they weren't going to have a high school component because there weren't enough students. And of course, we knew already that she wasn't going to public school. We also knew that there were no other quote unquote independent schools that we were impressed with, as well as any of the other school options. So we decided to homeschool her, and that's a whole other story. But we decided to homeschool her, and that ended up becoming larger and larger and larger and larger. And thankfully now it's gotten smaller and smaller and smaller again. But it reached a point where we had 21 students, and for us, that was, if you were, killing us, because we weren't able to touch each individual student in the way that we wanted to. So that to us was a point about how large things were. But we operated on, and we had studied when Ackerman Institute isn't my baby, if you will. So co-produced, co-directed by Iniana. It's her baby. Iniana was brought up in a place called Sharon, Mississippi, which particularly at the time she came up, was very, very poor. So her goal, her dream in life was to go to school, go to grad school, get her teaching, whatever, get her knowledge base in terms of the language, arts, English, and come back and open up a school for her nieces and nephews, so they wouldn't be miseducated the way she had seen so many of her classmates do. So Academic Institute was not my, it's not my baby. A lot of people think it's mine because they know my name, but this is her baby. This was her dream, and I just didn't have a competing dream at the time. I said, sounds good. Let's do this. So we were talking about Academic Institute, our first year of grad school. We met the first day of grad school, but we were talking about this from virtually the first day of grad school. So it's been in the works since then. We were just waiting for that, I guess, winning lottery ticket or whatever the case may be. So we'd have the money to create whatever it was that we needed to create. And we ended up not getting the lottery ticket, but realizing the importance of starting these institutions in our spaces, in our safe, sacred spaces, so that we could say what we needed to say in the way that we needed to say it, and the children could be comfortable in the way that they needed to be comfortable. This is, a house. Most of the successful, in fact, literally all of the successful independent schools that I am aware of, there may be one or two exceptions, they started in people's basements. They started in people's back rooms. They started in the living rooms of these people's spaces. And sometimes they expanded outward, but a lot of them have stayed where they're at. We've equated largeness with better. And I've come to the belief that warriors need to think that smaller is better, especially in the environment that we're in, where we are seen and understood as the enemy. And we, of course, understand our enemies as our enemy. But we become targeted much easier when we become very large, unless we are prepared for that. And most of us are not prepared for that. There's nothing wrong with not being prepared for that. People have their lanes, and they need to operate within those lanes that they're good in. You can't drive in 3-4 lanes at the same time. You need to stay in the lane that you're at. But anyway, Academic Institute, it started out, with our daughter and two other people two other children, young folk who were of that group, who were ready to go to high school, and that institution wasn't going to have it. But we have always had a philosophy of the community dictates what we do, and I don't like using the word conscious community anymore, because if you're anywhere near Atlanta, you know that that's a joke, especially here. So the center community essentially dictates to us what we're going to do. They come and tell us what to do, but they offer suggestions, or they present questions in such a way that that need is there. So every book that I've written has been based upon some need in the community or some question that came up. For those of you who are familiar with Your Reason, one of my homeboys, who's now an ancestor, one of his children and one of his grandchildren were at Akabin. And he came one day. He had been a student at Howard University. And he came to me and he said, the whole time I was there, I was able to skip the social sciences. Is there any book that is deals with, African-centered social science? I'd like to read it. That book led to the writing of Your Reason, which is a collection of essays dealing with different aspects of the social sciences from an African-centered perspective. Of course, him being my homeboy and being who he was, beautiful mind. He came back as soon as the book came out. He came running over to get his copy, and he looked at the book, he read the back of it, turned a few pages, said, "Okay, now where's the class? Where's the course?" That led to the first course, evening course here, an evening adult course here, which of course was family centered because we've always had children in our adult classes. That led to the course, Your Reason, which was the first course that was taught here at Akabin. I began to receive letters from brothers who were incarcerated, inquiring about books and other questions. Some of these letters hurt you to your heart. I remember one, I talk about that often, and you have to tell me if I'm going too far in the wrong direction, but I remember receiving a letter from a young man, and I cannot remember his age. I believe he had to be somewhere around 22, 23. This was about a decade and a half ago. And he was talking to me like I was his father. And he said, "Baba Baruti, can you tell me about women?" He said, "I've been locked up since, juvie." He said, "So I don't know about that. And what I see and hear, I know is wrong. It doesn't make sense. So can you tell me?" And that brought tears to my eyes. So after writing a number of brothers who reached out from um, the belly of the beast, interestingly, no sisters ever reached out to me. One reached out to Enia, and I wasn't pressed on that. I mean, my primary focus is brothers because I'm a brother. But I wouldn't, of course, turn away a letter from a sister. I'd probably pass it on to Enia if the question called for that. But anyway, um, I begin to receive more and more letters from brothers who were incarcerated. And this, of course, we're talking about the mission of Akaben Institute. So this became part of the responsibility to write these brothers and, answer whatever questions and book orders and all the rest of that. All our books for brothers who are incarcerated, they're 50% off. So, they were getting the books. But it reached a point, there were over 50 brothers who I'm trying to have a wife and a child, rebuild a house, operate a school, write books, and all the other things that go along with living, and write brothers, respond to brothers' letters, respond to brothers' requests, respond to brothers' points. So it got to a point where there were too many for me to write. I couldn't, it was sort of like when the school reached 21 students. I couldn't respond to them the way that they should have been responded to. So that led to the creation of Akaben Quarterly Newsletter, which goes out to this date. In fact, I just sent out one about a month and a half ago, which goes to the brothers who are incarcerated. Now there are 72 brothers who are locked up who are sent the newsletter. And every day, for those who can see, this is mail from this week. Every day or so, I'm getting a letter or letters from brothers to be added to the newsletter or inquiring about books or what have you. So that's part of, if you will, Akaben Institute extension. So this is Akaben Institute is not just the youth, the warriors in training. It's also with the adults. It's also, this is part of Akaben Institute. And I don't respond to everyone's call. I don't respond to everyone's request to be on their program. In fact, most of the requests I do not not that I don't respond to necessarily, but I don't come on because it's not speaking to warriors, and that's who I talk to. That's the only group that I talk to. If anyone else is, receiving this information, that's wonderful, but that's not my audience. Of course, they tell you should know your audience, and my audience is warriors. So that's what we do. Went to graduate school, University of Chicago. It's nothing to brag about. I wasn't impressed. Taught at Chicago State for a couple of years. Ended up teaching at Morehouse for 9 years. And Enia, of course, everywhere. She was there for 10 years. And it's interesting that I'm thinking about it. One of the things that warriors, of course, I believe, really need to give serious thought to, and I know many do, this complementarity thing where we have to find like minds who have different qualities, who can strengthen what we're doing in our work on the front line. Okay, Enia and I have been doing the same thing in the same space for a long time, going on 38 years now. And I hear people, and I know it has a lot to do with the way that we're raised in this culture and society. And this culture and society is very anti-African, and it's very anti-Ma'at. And it's understandable why a lot of us are in the distress that we're in, as well as not being in relationships that we should be in, because of the personality types that are produced within this type of culture, within Urugu's world. But we have to understand that this is something that has to be worked at. It's going to be extremely difficult. And I understand, yes, that there are reasons for people to move apart. I understand that there are significant degrees of incompatibility. I understand that if I was with a Negro, we wouldn't be together for long. But it is doable. And maybe this is a promotion, maybe this is an ad for African relations or whatever, but this is doable. Enia and I have literally been in each other's space for going on 38 years. We were in married student housing at University of Chicago, same house for, University of Chicago, it was like a 10-year trip. We moved here, we stayed in the same house, worked in the same, both of us worked in Chicago State, we came in here, both of us worked at Morehouse, we lived like a block from our offices. So we've been, and in this house, this is where Ackerman Institute is and has been. So literally for the last 2.5 decades, we have been in each other's space, breathing each other's air for all this time. So it is doable. That's not to say that there weren't disagreements or issues or what have you. When I talk to folks about complementarity, that's one of the points I try to make. If you're not having issues in your relationship, then probably something is wrong. Somebody is not speaking their piece. So, to have disagreements and problems and all the rest of that, that's part of the process. That struggle makes you stronger. The people are trying to run from so rapidly because, I don't want to deal with any struggle. No, struggle makes you stronger. And as the ancestors said, you really don't know love until you've been with somebody for years and years and years and years. And people disagree with that, but I don't, because when you've been with somebody for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, you get to see their strengths. You get to, you go through those difficulties where you get to really find out whether they're worth their weight, just how strong they are, just how smart they are. So I didn't mean to go off on that tangent, but I really wanted to make that point because Ackerman Institute isn't, we do couples coaching, counseling. They say you can't say counseling anymore. Couples coaching. That's part of Ackerman Institute, where we have people who, we sit down and we talk to them, premarital, newly married folks who are having major issues, and at least in one case, which was almost terrifying to me, where all she wanted to do was for us to convince him that it was over. And that's not something, that's not a situation you want to be in when you see your mission, your work as bringing African people together, as being, some form of a healer. But I would advocate, very, very strongly that those who are of the ability to start educational institutes. How do you kill a people? How do you change a people? You do it through their children. You take their children and you turn their minds. And one of the major reasons I'm talking about that is that on my timeline, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Make myself a quick note because I don't want to forget this. Before I get into that, though, I wanted to bring up another point. Maybe I'm talking about sad stuff today, but approximately 40 minutes ago, we had to make a call, and we didn't know why, but the person who called was somebody who almost never called, but who was a serious worker for African people. And she called to tell us that had committed suicide. And this news isn't even an hour old for us. And I'm thinking about warriors who I have known. Thankfully, there are only a few who have done the same over the years. There was a brother at Morehouse. His name was Val. And Val had been homeless for years. And he somehow made it to college. And he did more community service than any other student who I knew. He didn't forget. He was feeding our brothers and sisters, every day, not just, on weekends. That's why I honor, and some of the brothers online may know what I'm talking about, but that's why I honor brothers who do this work as best they can. Val Joseph was his name. I don't think there's any crime in saying his name. But he was Um, he was in one of my classes, and he was sharp. But of course, I wasn't really impressed with that. I was impressed with his work, which is something that a lot of people miss out on because they have bought so much into this European insanity of image that they think that the image is the work. They think that just talking a good game or wearing the right attire or what have you makes them into a warrior because they can be articulate and eloquent in how they say it, or because they read this book or they read that book. I've encountered warriors who wanted to dismiss me, again, not arrogantly saying this, but who wanted to dismiss me because I hadn't read this book by that person, hadn't read this book by that person. But I'm doing the work, at least to the best of my ability. But Val was, I knew him for about a year and a half, and I would send students to him because the most popular class I taught was called Men in Society. And in this class, one of the requirements for the class, which the school didn't approve of, but well, technically I really didn't care. They had a 2-week requirement of community service, which is equivalent to so many hours. And they had to do this in order to pass the class. And I was really pleased at the number of students who had never done community service. And then once it was over, they kept going because they found some form of fulfillment in that. But came to school one day and found out that Val had committed suicide. And I was thinking, as this sister was talking to us, how much more work Val could have done for us if he hadn't been overcome. Now, I wrote an essay about suicide in, I believe it was Negroes and Other Essays. It might have been Menticide, especially looking at Black males, because the high suicide rates now are among young Black males, I believe between the ages of 10 and 14.
Wow.
And we think that we're bad here. Go to Australia. Casey, we need to be comparative with this. I know we're in bad shape. I'm not going to sit and mince with that word, trying to make it sound all pretty. We're okay. No, we're in bad shape. That doesn't mean we're not working. That doesn't mean we're not doing our work. Okay, but we're in bad shape in this country. Brothers getting locked up, shot. Sisters getting locked up, shot. Incarceration rate of sisters is greater than that of Black males. There's still only 1 in every 6. One to compare to every 6 Black males who are locked up as Black females, but they're locking up sisters left and right. The African proverb said, "They come and get your men at night, they'll be back and get your women in the morning." I tell students all the time, it's morning. But all of the contribution that Val could have made over these years, if he didn't live in this insanity, if this insanity hadn't broken him to the point where he felt that whatever it was that was weighing him down would never be released, and he couldn't do anything about it. So he'd rather be gone than have to deal with it. And this is the same thing with this sister we found out about today. The weight of the world on her shoulders. And she had a community, but the way she had been brought up in this reality as an African in this reality was too much. So we need to listen to the signals from our fellow frontliners. Okay. Look for changes. Look for anything that's not right. Because we need every single solitary one of us that we can get. But back to our children, in terms of if you want to change a people, or in fact, if you want to kill a people, because you can kill a people and they're still walking around. I knew plenty of students who were sitting in class, but they had already dropped out. They're just sitting in the desk, just holding up space. You want to change your people, change your children. And if we want to see where we're going, look at where the children are going. Look at what they're doing. Look at what they're being allowed to access. And I say allowed out of anger or righteous rage, if you will, because I am so disappointed in some of the things that are happening to our children as a result of people who are supposed to be in the center community, who are raising up their children to be European, who are following child raising practices which fit our enemy and turn them against us. People pull out all of these quote unquote white classics, have their children read them, and then they wake up and want them then to read the black classics, African classics, but they're looking at them through European eyes. It's like history is supposed to teach us something. For us in particular, it's supposed to teach us what we're not supposed to be like. It's supposed to teach us the strength of a man, the strength of a woman, who obviously we don't recognize a lot of the way that this silliness online with black men and black women is going on. Where do we think that's going? It's escalating, continues to grow. And we still don't get the point that this is Urugu's tactic. It's just simply a more sophisticated level of divide and conquer. And now we've taken on the responsibility of doing it for them. I'm on my timeline and I'm looking, and it's like every third or fourth or fifth ad, because they're full of ads, ad that comes up is about this anime, this art. And there was one there which said game heroes. And I talk to the children, sheroes. I talk to the children about this all the time. They say, yeah. And you see nothing but sex. They're not engaged in sexual acts, but everything about the picture is sex. So it's like you got pornography with the little ones. If you're not doing what needs to be done to protect the minds of our children, now once they're grown, you can't do anything. But if you're not doing everything you can to protect the minds of the children, then you're not doing your work. Wade Noble's in, I forget which of the book, which book it was. He made the point that if we're not teaching our children all that they are, all of who they are, talk about their story, their tradition, their strength, their enemies, all the rest of that, their power, their need to struggle, their need to understand, as now John Clark said, the loneliness of struggle. If we're not teaching them this, that we have, as he said, no character. They didn't say a piece of a character here, partial character, or, you working it, you make it. No, you have no character. If you know what you know and you're not passing it on to your children without compromise, that's what warriorhood is supposed to be about. You stand your ground. You stand your African ground. If we're not relaying that to our children in the way they understand, if we're not demonstrating that, so whenever they see us, they're clear that's what we are doing, imagine what the children think when they see brothers hanging around having a conversation and a sister leaves an event at night with a stroller and holding the hand of a toddler and nobody walks her to her car. I wonder what the children think. I wonder what the children think when they come to African events and they don't see security. They don't see the men who they know handle this, whether they're in uniform or not. We're teaching our children through our actions. We're supposed to be showing them the way, what it means to be African. However you want to say African, I don't care. We're supposed to be showing them the way to be African, showing them the way to be our ancestors, showing them the way to be our warrior ancestors. We're supposed to be showing them the way through our word, our thought, and our deed. And so many of us are dropping the ball. Even in these games, we're allowing them to look at something as if it doesn't have an impact on their mind. Urugu is good. You think we got into this situation because they're idiots? No, they're good at what they do. They're good at destruction. They're good at killing minds. Bobby E. Wright's menticide was correct. They are exceptionally good. They are masters of death, destruction, and domination. Now, that evil genius is genius. And we're walking around like it's just a game. Like we weren't brought here. We weren't brought into existence to handle this situation for our children. We're brought here to have these conversations like the revolution is a conversation. Of course, we know that conversation is important. How is she going to organize what needs to be organized? How are you going to do what else you got to do? But I would argue that the balance should be with the work. There should be an African Center educational institution every block, just like there's in every church and every liquor store on every block. None of our children should have to go to their school unless we want them to. I don't care how many black faces are there. Because most of those black faces are there because they're promoting somebody else's idea for our children. The school to prison pipeline, it just didn't pop into thin air. It's interesting. Here in Georgia, there's a county. This was about maybe a decade and a half ago, too. There's a county here in Georgia where they discovered that the teachers in this area had a pension fund for their retirement. And this pension fund was doing exceptionally well. So these teachers, this is a predominantly black county here in Georgia. City, municipality, regardless, I can't remember exactly, don't need to. And they discovered that this pension fund was an investment in the prison system. Because then they made a connection between the number of black males who somehow were getting suspended, getting in trouble, blah, 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 and the connection between that and the prison pipeline. And these teachers who, these were their children. At least they looked like them. Teachers need to live in a neighborhood that the children they teach come from also, just like cops. Like, that's necessarily going to make a difference, but still. So they were basing their retirement on the incarceration of black children because they knew that once they suspended a child, just like once you go get locked up, that means that there's an extremely great probability that you're going to be locked up for the rest of your life. That's money in the bank for retirement for those who have a pension fund involved in that. In fact, no, we're not doing the 100. I just did a thing for Men's Quarterly on the 100s on talking about the statistics. You know, there are people who have done calculations on the probability of incarceration from birth for blacks and for whites. It's gotten so bad that that's not even a ridiculous question. So you have so many more you have so much greater probability of going to prison if you are born a black male at the point of birth, at the point of conception. Not just the point of birth, but at the point of conception. The probability of you going to prison relative to the probability of a white male going to prison from the point of conception. We have reached a point where we don't even get surprised by research like that. It doesn't even, faze us. We're like, okay, well, what's the next question? What are we going to do with this? How can we make some money off of this? The level of immorality, sexual immorality, because I base my behavior on my ancestors. You talking to me? Okay. Yeah, I have a wife here, so I have to respond. What do we think it's going to look like in another 20 years? I hope we're not like that deep Christian mentality And I'm not going to get into Christians or what have you. My mother is a Baptist, and I've seen her do more for African people in our community than folks who walk around talking about I'm atheist. So it's not about that, but it's about that deep belief that you're here to save yourself. So we have people who have that mentality. So whatever their children do, that's on them because they got to save themselves. In what way, shape, form, or fashion is that even remotely what our ancestors believed? Oh, that's right. Well, we have some people who, really believe that tradition is backward, archaic, old, outdated, that our ancestors were just stupid. So we need to follow the winners, the intelligent ones. But I've said time and time again, I don't know of any people, I've never come across a people in my reading who, when they became victorious, when they won, when they were in power, when they had empires, who relinquished, who let go of their ancestors. I don't know of any. And I look around the world now, and I've been looking around the world for a while, and I don't see anyone who is talking about their tradition is old, archaic, outdated. Just like I don't see anybody else who is talking about their men ain't worth the time of the day and their women ain't worth the time of day. We are a very unique people in a very unique situation, a situation of denial, a situation where family members will see a warrior being a warrior and they'll act like he or she is crazy, that they have no sense, that we need to stay away from them because we don't want to experience any of the fallout, because we know, and subconsciously we know, that Urugu is going to try to kill them. And we don't want to be anywhere near that when that happens. Even though we're in denial that Urugu is like that, we subconsciously know. To be a warrior in this land, on the face of this planet, wherever we are, is one of the hardest jobs, period. If I had to do it over again, I'd do it over again. But it's one of the hardest things that we do, because not only are we fighting against enemies, we're fighting against Negroes and lost souls, the deeply mental. And there's already a loneliness that comes with this, and then not to have a family who understands, whether they agree or not, who understands. That's a major ongoing conversation among warriors. I was part of the conversation earlier today here. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that? People deal with it differently. It's like a lot of brothers, myself, I'm just, whatever. You just don't disrespect me. But all the warriors have to deal with that in some way, shape, form, or fashion. I say we have to build family from within, from the front line. Remember, now John heard Clark say, we're not ready for revolution because we're not ready to kill family. Those family members who are traitors. So it's essentially a lot of hot air. But Sister Shakti, you asked me to introduce myself, and I've been I've been talking for how long?
Nothing wrong with it, Baba. Nothing wrong with it. This is exactly what we were waiting on. Thank you for adding on that part. Now, so since we're here, the title for tonight's episode is the Asafo Warrior Class. Could you please tell us what an Asafo Warrior is?
Okay. Asafo is a tree word from the Khan people of West Africa, and just like Abidi Fahodie is from the same language, same dialect. And Asafo is a warrior, and just a point of clarification: Asafo applies to men or women. Ketu, which is Kiswahili, that only applies to female warriors. But Asafo is for men and women. However, I have yet to find where women are called or described as Asafo, because we just, things just sort of settle into their own natural order. So most brothers are referred to as Asafo, And most sisters I've encountered who are referred to as Ketu, and there's not any rules that go with that. They're just sort of like the way it's worked itself out. Asafo is a warrior. And we really, really, really need to understand what that means. Because so many of us feel that we're a vanquished people, that we've lost, we fought a war, we lost, and we should have lost. So therefore, we need to adjust accordingly. I'm of the opinion that we didn't lose. I'm of the opinion that retreat is important to gather resources. Just like on the chessboard, if your queen is threatened, then you move her back to a place out of being captured, but you move her to a position where she can attack better from. You can just run. There are those of us who, and I've pretty much moved out, me, based upon my age, I pretty much moved out of being in Asafo to being somebody involved in the politics of, the community, et cetera, et cetera. But I have a great distaste personally for politics. And for me, because of the nature of the war that exists now, then I still fall into, I guess I say the seasoned warrior class. So Asafo are our warriors. They fight for us. They are the servants of the people. And I'm talking about servants from an African center perspective. I'm not talking about Urugu, just like when we talk about the Kemetic mystery system, we call the people who taught that masters. Okay? But if you say master within the European cultural framework, then you're talking about something very, very different than you're talking about in terms of our Kemetic ancestors, where you had mastered the material. You knew what you were talking about in all areas of study. So here we're talking about warriors who are servants of the people. That's our first and foremost priority. We look at our African tradition. If we look at our tradition, then we understand that, as I like to say, we're people of evidence. That means that whatever you're called or whatever claim that you make to your role or your responsibility is based upon what you do. Proof. You can't just walk into a situation and say, all right, I'm a warrior, let's get to work. There has to be evidence that you're a warrior in order for you to be called a warrior, in order for you to claim that responsibility. Just like same thing, father, mother, whatever. Okay, somebody comes to you and they say that you're a cook. Well, I want to taste this. Just because you have on a cook's outfit, cook's cap, whatever, can be you holding a spatula in one hand, that doesn't mean that you can cook. I want to taste. And that's interesting in this culture of image, whereas Chuck D says, what? It's the new currency. We can walk around and pretend that we're whatever it is that we want to pretend to be, and people will act like that's what we are because we say so. That's not warriorhood for us. Warriorhood is proven. It is done. When I was really giving deep thought to this book, I saw a number of things. And even after that, I saw a number of things that talked about, and I don't want to get away from serving other people, but talked about talked about the evidence. And one of them was we were doing our annual fundraising event, and there was a young man who wanted to be part of Occupant Institute. He wanted to assist. And of course, we're not letting you in until we've watched you in the community for quite a while. We want evidence. And even though then you still can't, I mean, Fred Hampton, he died as a result of something that he was not aware of. Excuse me, he was murdered as a result. Need to use correct terminology as well. As a result of something he wasn't aware of because he put his trust in somebody who had given him evidence that he was worth trusting. But we're at this event, and this young man walks in, he greets everybody, and then he, kind of like disappears like everybody else does, going about their business, going to the vending tables, et cetera, et cetera. And I really didn't give it much thought, hundreds and hundreds of people there. Well, maybe not hundreds, but there were a lot of people there. But after a while, it somehow registered to me, where's he at? Because I'm looking around, seeing where the warrior's at, making sure everything is protected the way it needs to be protected. And I see this shadow on the balcony of this building. And on the balcony, some of the children are playing. And I see this shadow standing up against the wall, the edge of the balcony, the corner of the balcony, just standing there. Look back about a half an hour later, the shadow's still standing there. It's not moving. He put himself on point. Nobody told him what to do. He didn't ask anybody what to do. He just knew that his responsibility at that point in time was to go where security was the most lax and to fill it in. I saw the same thing at an Abakusim Sunsoon event for Mama Marimba, where he was sitting in the doorway, standing in the doorway, watching the children who were out in the yard playing. So we're sincerely a people of evidence. And to me, that was like perfect. I'm watching. We're servants of the people. We've so many of us have got this warrior thing all wrong, not only because of the image part, but because of get this, but also because we misinterpret the word servant. We are who we are because our community indicates that that's who we are. I'm not talking about the conscious community or the quote unquote black community, or I'm talking about the centered community because they say that we are who we are. Those are the only voices I'm listening to. And our job is to serve them. It's an honor and a privilege to have people who you love and respect, who are giving you the right to protect them. That's a privilege not many people get. To be honored by people who love you because you make them feel safe. You know, they know that with you, whatever needs to get done is going to get done. Sisters getting physically accosted in her home, brothers come in and handle it. Nobody's going to sit there and pat them on their back or applaud. That's not what they're there for. They're doing it because they are the servants of the people. If applause is coming from anywhere, it's coming from the warrior ancestors. Elderly sister down the block, can't move around well, wakes up, lawn is mowed, hedges are trimmed, porch is swept, steps are swept, cars washed, sidewalk is cleaned. That's warriorhood. Not just walking around with a 9 or whatever it is that you may carry. And of course, we know that that's a necessity. But I'm talking about the real work where we take care of those people who we love. Our people are getting brutalized, assaulted, lied on, raped, stolen from. How are you going to call yourself a warrior if you're not doing everything in your power to stop that? How are you going to call yourself a warrior when you're not doing everything in your power to secure your community, to make sure that the babies can play without some freak coming in the yard? Warriorhood isn't, let's say, love is an act. Warriorhood is an act. It's not a pretense. It's not a game. You must be willing to die because warrior is rooted in the root word war. We're not peaceers. We're warriors. And we're supposed to act accordingly. Whatever the situation, there should never, ever be an event of African people, at least those of us who validate us. There should never be an event with them where there is not security. Ever. I don't care if the sisters are having a sewing circle and brothers aren't allowed in because they're talking about you. Then there needs to be somebody around that house, somebody around that facility, making sure that nobody gets to them. So warriors are servants of the people. I believe it's in Asafo. I have a quote by Carter G. Woodson about the real servant of the people. Yeah, he had an issue or two too, but that's irrelevant for this discussion. It's like a rites of passage programs. We're teaching our sons and our daughters how to be warriors, which means that part of their rights should be community service to somebody who is of value to us who needs it. The elder down the other side of the street, garage is falling apart. Brothers get together, sons get together. That weekend, rebuild them a garage. That's warriors' work. School needs paper. One of our independent schools needs paper. Brothers get paper. One of the most profound warriors, and I'm not finished with this warrior thing yet, but one of the most profound men in my life, a Jegna. And you should look up the definition of Jegna in one of my books or Wade Noble's books. Don't look to them for our definitions. About all the things that are required to be called a Jegna versus this mentor nonsense, because that's a homosexual term. I discussed that in Homosexuality and Feminization of African Males after I was led to do that by an elder in the community. But one of the most important people who's now an ancestor in terms of warriorhood for me was Hannibal Afrique. Hannibal Afrique had land. He did survival training, gun training. He was an educator. He taught in schools. He was everywhere. You call Baba Hannibal 4 o'clock in the morning because you have an issue, Baba Hannibal is answering the phone. I dedicated my book Centered to Baba Hannibal. And of course, I sent him a copy. And he calls me upset. So you can't call me a Jegna? I'm not a Jegna. I haven't engaged my enemy in physical battle and blah, 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 blah. I said, Baba Hannibal, that's the way we see you. You're the best model of that we have right now. And he, thankfully, because didn't want Baba Hannibal upset with me. He calmed right down. He's okay. All right. Okay. And by the way, Madasi for dedicating this book to me. Warriors that do the work. In class, we'll be talking about something having to do with survival or guns or how to make weapons out of PVC pipes, et cetera, et cetera. And the looks on some of the faces are like, so what? I say, their children are being prepared for war. And their faces are still saying, so what? So I look up girls' gun competition. And I scroll down, and I scroll down, and I scroll down, and I scroll down, and all they see is white girls. And I type in fathers teaching their sons how to shoot. I scroll down, I scroll down, I scroll down, and you see white males teaching their sons how to shoot guns, and you see black males teaching their sons how to shoot a basketball. Google it. Or maybe since the last time I said something, they've changed it up a little bit. I doubt it. They're preparing their children for war. You see it in the gun magazines. You see it in survival magazines. You see it in gun and ammo. You see it in the gun magazines. You see white females. You see white girls. You see white boys. And I tested this one day because I like to show people that I know what I'm talking about by showing what Urugu is showing. So I'm at Morehouse and I'm teaching, talking about that. I talk about whatever I want to in class. Nothing has changed that. And we're talking about survival and they're scoffing at what I'm saying. At least a few of them are. So I lead a class, take someone with me, go down to this magazine shop. And I just blindly picked up like 5 or 6 gun rifle type magazines. Soldier Fortune was one of them. Those type magazines. Paid for them, drove back to class. And we went through those magazines. And I guess I say, luckily for me, there were no pictures of any Africans in there with any kind of weapon whatsoever. But there were plenty of pictures of white females and white boys. And this is about the time that they were having all these gun shows when we were talking about that. But we did find one picture. And it was a full page picture, like the center of the magazine, a full page picture. Had maybe, I don't know, 50, 60 people, maybe less, maybe more, but it was a bunch of them. All of them had their different types of guns, rifles, shotguns. All of them had their different type of weapons, in front of them or up in the air, what have you, showing them off. And there was this one lone black guy in the back. And I'm not trying to be funny, but he was so dark that the only thing that you could see was like my grandfather. He's called Mr. Blue. His skin was that blue, velvety blue black. And one black guy in the back of the picture, on the back row, only thing you see, like I said, was the whites of his eyes. He was holding up a 9. His chamber was open and his clip wasn't. It was the only gun in the magazine that was not prepared to shoot. I said, they talk to each other. They know what they're showing each other. Every other gun in there was loaded. White males, white females, white boys, white girls holding up the guns, and this lone black grown man in the back. Chamber empty, chamber open, no clip. See these survival magazines, these survival movies, these survival shows, they're talking to each other. We're going for entertainment. They're talking to each other. They've never stopped preparing for war. Show me when. Show me when they haven't been engaged in it. And we think we're safe. And we have warriors who are walking around, or could be warriors walking around, who are thinking that we're safe. Because if they didn't think that, then they would be doing things very differently than they do. The evidence. I'm talking about what they're saying. I'm talking about what they're doing. If you're a warrior, then you should be acting like a warrior. There should be no point in time when I can quickly have access to your children. That should always be covered. I have a list of things in Asafo that warriors are. I can find this real quick. I think it's important. Yes. A warrior refuses to be at peace with anything less than the total liberation of his people. There's no compromise. There's no halfway point. There's no I'm happy. There's no rest. There's no I'm retired. I remember hearing a former Panther saying that, he's retired. And I'm like, you retire when the war is over. You retire when you've won. You retire when victory is achieved. Other than that, there's no retirement because your children's lives are at stake. Your grandchildren's lives are at stake. The sovereignty of 7 generations after you is at stake. So there's no such thing as retirement. Retirement has never been part of my vocabulary. I've never, even before, it just didn't make sense to me when there's work to be done. So until that occurs, that's the idea of stopping. Well, just say a warrior's either fighting or they're laid out on the battlefield. I'm reading stories in our tradition about men who couldn't go home because they hadn't won, or were shamed by the community because they had run away from the battle. Embarrassing their families. The center community is my family. Should be yours as well. nothing short of the complete and total. Are we compromising? Complete and total liberation, empowerment, and sovereignty of African people. Nothing short of that. Period. 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 Nothing short of that, ever. Nothing short of that should ever satisfy a warrior. Well, they were never a warrior from the get. This is like, we got to come out of this dream world. This is like life. It's not like this is a role that we're playing. This is what I can't quite understand. We're acting like we have forever. We're acting like this is a game. We're acting like, we can play. We got time to play. We got room to play. Yeah, warriors need rest. Yeah, warriors need to laugh. I mean, I've never been in a situation with warriors where there wasn't somebody who was always cracking jokes until the time got serious, and then the jokes ended because it was time to get to work, a different kind of work. But we're not, it's like we're not taking this seriously. We're still afraid because we know what Urugu does. People who use their children as shields because they're afraid to do what needs to be done. And I'll talk about this movie until I'm, black in the face. I guess that's what it would be for us. In The Dead Zone by Stephen King, and I'm not advocating Stephen King because he's a racist science fiction writer. I read most of what he's written, well, at least up to till about a decade ago. And in this movie, this guy was in a car accident, was in a coma for a good number of years. When he came out of his coma, he was semi-crippled. But if he touched somebody, he could see what was going on, what the future was. When he first discovered it, because he touched this nurse, and her house was on fire. And he said, go home. And she ran home, and the house was on fire. She saved her children, whatever. But he touched this guy who was running for office, and he realized that if this guy became president, he was going to start a thermonuclear war and kill everybody. So he said, that's why I'm here. That's why I have this special power, to stop this guy. So he set that as his mission. He went to this church where they had an upper pew in the back. And he got up in there with his little rifle. And the people start coming in. And then the guy was standing up there who was running for the office. And he had this, he's talking to a family. And the guy pulled out his rifle, aimed, and somebody said, gun! And they shot him. He fell off the balcony thing. He didn't die immediately. And he's laying on the ground, and the woman who he had relationships with way back, she came over, and he touched her hand. And he realized that the guy didn't become the president. And then he died. The reason the guy didn't become president was because when someone said gun, he was holding a child, and he put the child in front of him to protect him from getting shot. And they got that on camera, and they aired it on the news. This is us putting our children in front of ourselves because we're afraid of what Urugu will do to us. That's not warriorhood. Back in the day, we used to just call people like that punks. We used to say, you straight up punk. No way to get around it. No way to make it sound nice. No way, none of that. You're just a punk. We have to start standing and setting the example. That's elders on down. Elders aren't exempt from that. Standing as models of what it means to be a warrior. Let's talk about Robert Charles. I can't remember if it was North Carolina or South Carolina. It doesn't make a difference. All over. Clarence Mumford talks more about him than anybody else in his book, Race and Reparations. There's a crowd of over 10,000. Over 10,000 crackers who came to see him get lynched. Over 10,000. And they said before they were able to lynch him, he knew he was God. Before they were able to get to them, he either killed or maimed like 10 people, 10 crackers before they were able to do that. And I said, I wish I was a little black boy sitting on a hill way off in the distance. And I could say, oh, that's how men act. That's what a man is. Oh, okay. I was confused for a while, but now, okay, I thought that the new men walked around in dresses. Okay, I didn't know. I had no idea. I thought that being a man was somebody who went around talking about black women like they're dogs. Oh, that's what a man is. Not a punk, not a coward. Somebody touches his wife, somebody touches his children, he does something about it. Oh, that's what a man does. Oh, okay, I got it now. So Asafo, I don't care what the situation is. I don't care how many of you there is. My father used to tell me, a man can stand alone. And he wasn't saying you need to stand alone. He's saying you do what's right. I don't care who is there. I don't care who's got the camera. I don't care how many of them there is. Especially if you already know that you're gone. I mean, you're sitting there begging the cop not to shoot you when you know he's going to. New Orleans, okay, Madasi. But Alias. And it was somewhere in the South. You got to stop being afraid. There's nothing wrong with fear, because fear can galvanize you. It can make you do what needs to be done. Your senses get hyper, so you can hear better, you can move faster, you can see clearer. Nothing wrong with fear, but to allow that fear to regulate how you respond to something, that's a different animal. That's a whole different animal. Warrior is an educator, not a teacher. What do we mean by that? That means the educators tell the truth. That means that they have to create an environment where that can be done. They tell the truth. They're not going to sit all day moaning and groaning about how they can't do whatever it is that they can't do in the public school system. If they need that money to finance the lives of their family, their children, then they can use a piece of that to start the education of their own children. And I'm not just talking about biological. The children in the community are your children. We look back at our tradition. Every child in the community was your brother and sister. Every mama was your mama. Every baba was your baba. Because that was how we defined family. But Asafo, warriors are educators. They make sure that they know the truth to the best of their ability. I mean, you have to go out and read 10,000 books. You do as best you can. What more can or should be asked of you? You do the best you can. You read the best you can. I'm a slow reader. I've always been a slow reader. And yes, I've read, I imagine, tens of thousands of books by now, but I'm a slow reader. I had just had a lot of free time to do it in. Grad school, 10 years worth of grad school, it affords you a lot of time to read. Especially when you're determined to catch up and surpass enemies. You do the best you can with what you have, but you don't lie to your children. Why would I can't understand that level of weakness. I can't understand you sitting there lying to your children. You're not afraid that they're going to get hurt. You're not afraid that they may come out racist. You're afraid of what's going to happen to you or what's going to be said about you. Or how they're going to look at you when they find out that your child is a revolutionary. That's what you're afraid of. Asafo is a non-intellectual. Most of the intellectual, that's why I hate when people call me an intellectual. Most of the people who I know, the vast majority of people I know who are intellectuals do nothing. Armchair radicals, armchair intellectuals, they don't do jack but run off at the mouth, trying to impress people with their vocabulary. I'm not impressed. My vocabulary is as bad, if you will, or badder. I'm not impressed. Intellectualizers don't do anything. As our ancestors said about wisdom, you can, sit at some of the wisest people's feet in the world. And some of these people are speaking to us now. When the first thing come out of my mouth, I sat at the feet of Giant Clark. I sat at the feet, whatever. But you compromised us by trying to introduce into leadership positions in our community white females as leaders and homosexual black males as educators for our children. But you want to brag about whose feet you sat at. Our ancestors said that you, regardless of whose feet you sat at, regardless of how many books you read, you're not wise unless you apply that to the benefit of the community. If you have all that quote unquote knowledge and you're so intelligent, but it's not applied, you're not wise, you're stupid. Asafo unconditionally respects African women. And of course, Asafo is directed toward our men, even though I believe that, and I know quite a few women who have read Asafo, some because it helps them to frame in their mind what they're looking for in a man. Some because they know that most of the things in there also apply to them. But speaking to men who are teaching boys how to be men, the most important priorities, respecting African women. As a primary, we say first teacher, mother, all the rest of that. Well, then that's supposed to be protected. And in some of our traditions on the continent, if you scared a pregnant woman, it was the equivalent of a felony. Because the ancestors understood the connection. So these are, I say over and over again, these are our women. They belong to us. Just like we are their men, we belong to them. So you protect what is yours, or it's not yours. If you can't protect it, it doesn't belong to you. If you can't protect it, it's not yours. To me, there's some of the most, to me, profound thoughts are stated in such simple terms. If you cannot protect it, it is not yours. If you do not protect it, it's not yours. We can sit and intellectualize that all we want to. We can rationalize that all we want to. Let's say reasoning is the shackles of a coward. You can't protect your woman or women or the community that you're a part of or your children. They're not yours. You can come in and do what he wants to. Or you can come in and do what she wants to. It wants to, whatever. So if we can't protect our community, then we have no business calling ourselves warriors. It's as simple as that to me. It's not your community. You protect what's yours. So if you're not protecting your community or the piece of your community that you've been assigned by the rest of the warriors at that point in time, then you're not a warrior. You're a straight up punk. So we respect our women. Does that mean that we don't get in disagreements with them, arguments with them? Does it mean that we're always happy with each other? Does that mean we always do things the way that they want it done? No. But our job is to create the space where we can have our arguments. Our job is to create a safe, sacred space where we can disagree. I don't care how upset you are with her. She should never be allowed in a situation that's dangerous. We work the little nitpicky stuff out later. The tremendous trifles, you work that out later. She should never be in a position of danger. Ever. Because all it takes is 1 second, one time. And we know what happens when she disappears. All of these scenarios are the worst possible things. Just run through our head forever. And we rightfully feel guilty because we didn't do our job. Now, if we're kept from doing our job, that's a different story. If she wants to walk out that door at night and walk down the street to the store, regardless of what you say or do, and she won't let you go, well, then you can't do anything about that. But as long as security is your domain, as long as that's what you're supposed to take care of, she's supposed to be safe. She's supposed to feel safe. And that's one of the worst things that was brought to us at least twice for our coaching counseling sessions, where she felt she didn't feel secure with him. She didn't feel safe with him. And I'm talking about him doing something to her, which is a whole nother no. But she didn't feel safe when she was out with her in her home because of the things that he did, the way that he acted, what he didn't prioritize. She's having to run the security and he's watching football. And she hears the noise and he's saying, go check. Asafo R. Entrepreneurs. How do you have a nation if you don't own the businesses? How do you have a nation if every store in your nation is owned and controlled by foreigners, enemies? How you gonna have sovereignty when you don't have control over imports, exports, business? We've got to stop using the excuse, well, I don't come from a business family. I don't have business skills. My parents didn't have business skills. When my father retired from the Army, they were able to get one laundry, and when they moved to another state, they got another coin operator laundry, opened up some other businesses. Neither one of them had any credentials in business or anything like that. That's amazing to me, the number of black males walking around credentials in business working for somebody else. We don't understand how Urugu insidiously works against us in that particular area. You have more money going into HBCUs, into business departments than any other department at a time when white businesses are downsizing. So our children, our sons and our daughters are being tracked out of competition with their enemies because their whole mindset is to go work for corporate America, whatever that may be. And corporate America is downsizing, and you better believe they're going to hire their own sons and daughters before you. I know I would if I were them. We need to open up businesses. We need to do bartering with each other. I don't care how small the business is. I don't care how weak your product is. Practice. Get better. Get a better product. Make yourself the product. Get some skills. You're never too old for that. I'm 67. I'm putting up shingles on this wooden shingles on the side of this house. An auto mechanic, small engine mechanics. And for anyone who's older a certain age, over retirement, depending upon the state, you can take colleges, courses in tech schools and regular colleges for free. Every state has that. It's just not all of the schools, but every state has that. So I can go take courses at Georgia State. Don't have to pay anything because I'm over that age. So age shouldn't be a barrier to anything. We should have businesses. Children should see us have businesses. They shouldn't see us going and working for those people who we talk about like dogs. They should understand if we have to work for those people we talk about like dogs, that's to get us to our businesses. They should see evidence of that. And one of the questions I always ask young men when they would come and ask, could they take our daughter out? And they come and ask because they knew I wasn't playing. They knew that I will take your head off for my daughter. And I would ask them, what do they want to be when they grow up? Whatever it was, I would ask them, what are you doing now to pursue that end? And if it was nothing, then they weren't taking my daughter anywhere. So not being able to feed your family, being an entrepreneur at this particular point in time, it's got nothing to do with you having a vision of being an entrepreneur and using what you're doing at this time to prepare for that. No excuses anywhere. No loopholes. No way to get around it. Man, punk. It's that clear to me because we are in such a desperate state right now. There is no gray area anymore. There's nowhere you can sit and comfortably be a warrior and a punk at the same time. There's no gray area. That's been gone. Some of us trying to pretend that it's still there, but that's been gone. Which brings up the many of us who are just waiting for Africans to fully lose so that we can really, really go in and blend in with Europeans. And the last one on my list here, this major list right here, perimeter defenders. Perimeter, the outside, the border, fence. That's our job. Nobody's supposed to get in who doesn't belong in. You got an event out in the park? Well, there should be some brothers spaced around that perimeter. Someone will bring you some food, something to drink. We look back at our traditions. The blacksmith wasn't in the town, wasn't anywhere near the town. He was on the outskirts of the town. But because we're in this culture, we get confused because we watch the cowboy movies and we see the blacksmith was in town. We don't understand the significance of blacksmithing to the African culture, African cultural imperatives. We got the perimeter. Nobody's supposed to get past us. We're not going to talk about what sisters will do to them if they do get past us, but they're not supposed to get past us. We're supposed to be the first line of defense. We're supposed to run interference for anything that's coming toward our community. We need to redefine Asafo from the heart because we're defining it from the screen. If I had to judge the amount of Asafo that we have in our community based upon what I see in social media, I think all of us were. Even the flaming ones. Just like if I was coming from outer space, observing what's going on in this country, I think that we think based upon our consumption, the vehicles we drive, the houses we live in, that black folks are in charge in the United States. I would think that. Because we're so involved in image. And in the West, in most cases, there's no substance to that image. There's nothing there, hot air, as they used to say back in the day. Just a bunch of hot air. And since so many people are involved in the hot air, somebody who is deadly about the business of doing the work or protecting the community, they're looked at it like something's wrong with them. Because they are so far from the norm, it's not funny. Can you imagine a people who really wanted to protect their children and themselves calling agents of their enemies to come and solve their problems? There was a time, even in this country, we didn't do that. Now we think we're safe. Now we think we're one with Jerugu. Now we see there's no difference. Now we think we're not at war. We think that they love us because they'll allow their daughters to sleep with us. And some of our dumb sons will allow that too. I have no tolerance whatsoever for interracialists. None. I see nothing but treason, sleeping with the enemy. Same way I don't see anything correct about being a homosexualized African. I'm not going to sit here and mince words. People are going to do what they're going to do. And I know that they have the support of Urugu because it's destroying us. But warriors have to think in terms of having to stand alone because you stand on righteousness. You stand on winning this war. And if you don't win this war, then you're an ancestor because you're laying on the battlefield. There's no other option. And again, Sister Shakti, you asked me a simple question.
We are definitely honored to receive the message that you have for us this evening. And I know that we don't have much time with you left, tonight. We discussed this earlier. However, before we do, let you get back to the Queen and your rest for the evening, I firstly would like to give all praise and honor to the ancestors for you, your life, your mission, your purpose, and for your being here with us tonight. And also, do you mind? Because audience, we got a free lecture tonight. We got a lot of jewels tonight for free. And Baba definitely needs his, what he needs to do what he does. So do you mind sharing your Cash App info with us so those who are present that may want to give a love donation are able to do so?
Yes, and we'd appreciate that. And I say before I do that, uh, we exist because of the community. I said we never received any government funds. We have been offered different things by different agencies. We refuse because we know that everything comes with strings. Even from African people, it comes with strings, but those strings are attached to us being warriors, doing the work. So if we stop doing the work, then the funds that we receive from our community would stop, as they should. So of course we ask for assistance because of this work. And we appreciate when we're given time to ask. So our Cash App is $ Ya M Baruti. That's YAAMBARUTI. $ Ya YAAM Baruti. And it'll come up probably as Linda Crawford or Linda Lloyd, but that's our Cash App.
Indeed. And where else could you show us the cover of the book that you're reading from right now?
Oh, this is, let me get the new version.
I must give, while Bob is doing that, I must acknowledge those who are in the comments section. We definitely have another one of our special warriors in the building, King Shamir Shabazz. And I, what's understood doesn't need to be explained. Everybody else, thank you. Your being here is just as special as everyone else. So yeah, there's the book.
Asafo.
In-
And
Indeed,
there's a workbook also for Asafo now, or
indeed,
study guide.
indeed. So where can we all support you and purchase the books, the workbooks, lectures, and anything else that you have available?
Everything is available at on our site. It's www.akabenhouse, AKOBENHOUSE, AKOBENHOUSE.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. So again, we know that you have to get back to the queen. We do acknowledge her as well. Maybe we can get her
Absolutely.
on the platform at some point in
Mhm.
time. However, we thank you so much. You are such a gift to us all.
Thank you.
I cannot sing your praises higher. I am so grateful for your presence, and you know, we have people in the comment section saying how they have 500 books and the
Mm.
workbooks, you know. So you have definitely touched the masses, and we thank you so much for your work, and we're here to support you, and you're supporting us in any way that we can. So is there anything else you would like to share with the people tonight before you retire?
Yes, I want to leave with a thanks to you, Madasi P, for you for doing this work, because this isn't easy, and you should be supported as well by the community, because it's one of those things we don't want to hear a month from now, well, this show isn't on anymore because the community doesn't support it, this store isn't open anymore because the community doesn't support it. You need to be supported as well. People need to realize the level of courage that doing this type of work calls for. So you need to be honored as well, and I appreciate, and I appreciate it. But I need for you also to understand the appreciation. And as I believe I said to you before we really came on, I don't accept invitations from everyone. I don't have time. But those people who I honor, I see them at work. I appreciate what they're doing. They're not compromising. They're not playing around with this. Um, I'll be there. So I look forward to the next time. I appreciate everyone being here and listening in. And um, a BB for Hodie.
Okay. So I see it's just me, and that's fine. You know, the connection has been giving us a little bit of issues tonight, and that's to be expected with this form of technology. However, again, I would like to thank Baba Baruti for coming through and blessing the platform with his presence. It's been a great time tonight. This is one of our classic episodes, top five for sure. If you're just joining in, please, go back to the beginning and get in tune with the message. Again, he repeated his Cash App information, and I thank you all for tuning in. Again, from my family to yours, peace, love, and beautiful Black power. Until next time, family, this has been Shakti Sterner, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.